Welcome back to our 2023 road trip to the Pacific Northwest. After Barstow, we continued west to Bakersfield, where we spent the night and caught the Amtrak San Joaquins the next morning as it departed for Stockton. The San Joaquins is a passenger train service operated by Amtrak in California's San Joaquin Valley. 6 daily round trips run between its southern terminus at Bakersfield and go to Stockton, with onward service to Sacramento and Oakland. One of the things I was really looking forward to on the trip was visiting the California Railroad Museum in Sacramento. The museum has numerous exhibits and historic rolling stock. Near the entrance are exhibits about what it was like to be an engineer and build the first railroad in California. Everything had to be brought in by rail up to the end of the existing line. Before that could happen, surveyors had to plot a course through the terrain to avoid steep grades and tight curves. This meant camping in the wilderness. There is also a life-size display of a snow shed being built. The Gold Coast was the first private railroad car by Lucius Beebe and Charles Clegg. They purchased the car in 1948. With the help of friend and Hollywood set designer Robert Hanley, they transformed the car with all the amenities they would need for luxurious rail travel, including a fireplace. We couldn't go inside the car, but looking through the windows gives hints to what it was like. The museum website also has a virtual tour of the car. Refrigerator cars, or reefers, had an enormous impact on California's agricultural history. Before refrigerator cars were perfected, most of California's perishable produce could only be sold locally, thereby limiting the state's agricultural potential. Experiments with refrigerator cars began in the 1860s, and by 1872, meat was being shipped successfully within the eastern states. By 1887, wholesale meat shipping was reliable enough to allow Midwestern cities such as Chicago and Kansas City to become national meat packing centers. After the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, many Californians turned to farming the fertile Delta. Ice-cooled railroad cars transported locally grown fruit and produce. The exhibit examines the critical role the railroad played in transporting the Central Valley's agricultural bounty to the surrounding region, state, and nation. The railroad helped to create the foundation for the movement known today as Farm to Fork. The railroad sleeping car once offered the ultimate in long-distance travel comfort. The St. Hyacinth is typical of the all-steel Pullman-type sleeping cars of the heavyweight era, the period between 1907 and the mid-1930s. Canadian National Railway's sleeping car number 1683 was delivered in 1929 by Canadian Car and Foundry Company in Montreal. It was one of 15 sleepers built to a standard Pullman design with 10 open sections, 1 drawing room, and 1 compartment. These cars received C and road numbers between 1674 and 1688 and were named for Canadian cities beginning with the letter S. The 36-seat Cochiti was ordered by Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway in April of 1936, one in a set of 8 cars for the new streamlined stainless steel train, the once-a-week first-class Super Chief running between Chicago and Los Angeles. A fine meal in the Cochiti was a gourmet experience. Presiding over the Cochiti cuisine was 51-year-old Peter Tausch, a trusted steward trained in the tradition of Fred Harvey fine dining service aboard Santa Fe dining cars. On the Super Chief maiden run on May 18, 1937, the Cochiti's menu included sirloin steak for two for $2.75, swordfish steak sauté for 75 cents, and old-fashioned boneless chicken pie for 85 cents. An after-dinner brandy or Corona was often a fitting conclusion to dining in the Great Manor. Great Northern Railway Post Office car number 42 is one of 6 streamlined baggage mail cars built for the Great Northern Railway by American Car and Foundry Company in 1950. It serves some of the railroad's speediest passenger trains, including the Western Star and possibly the mid-century Empire Builder, carrying mail between Chicago and the Pacific Northwest. Inside the moving car, armed postal clerks swiftly sorted mail as the train sped along at speeds up to 80 miles an hour. Most Western RPO service stopped in 1967 and is likely number 42 is retired that year. The car remained in the Great Northern St. Paul, Minnesota yards until 1979, when it was donated by Burlington Northern to the California State Railroad Museum. Southern Pacific 4294 is a Class AC-12 4882 cab-forward steam locomotive that was owned and operated by the Southern Pacific Railroad. It was built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works in March 1944 and was used hauling SP trains over the Sierra Nevada, often working on Donner Pass in California. The 281 was built in 1978 and spent most of its career with Amtrak based out of Chicago. Toward the end of its days with Amtrak, it was also leased out for freight service. In late 2001, the 281 was acquired by the California State Railroad Museum as an example of second-generation passenger diesel power in the United States. Santa Fe had visions of a company museum and was wise enough to hang on to a variety of locomotives with that in mind. It never happened, of course, and the collection was donated to the museum. Among those engines was an AB set of F units painted in the yellow war bonnet colors they wore at retirement. In the late 1980s, the Santa Fe wanted to create some films promoting their upcoming Superfleet intermodal service, and the filmmakers wanted some classic Santa Fe power for some of the scenes, which would then dissolve into contemporary scenes as the train passed. The Santa Fe arranged to use the museum's F units as part of the deal. The Santa Fe would restore them cosmetically for the museum, painting them back in the iconic red and silver war bonnet scheme. Interestingly, the 347C never wore the war bonnet colors with that number, as it was repainted into the yellow war bonnet scheme when renumbered from its second number, 306C. It was originally AT&S F39C. Southern Pacific Railroad 2467 is a preserved 262 Pacific-type steam locomotive. Built by Baldwin in 1921, it was used by the Southern Pacific Railroad to pull passenger trains until it was retired from service in 1956. On July 25, 1960, it was donated to the city of Oakland, California, who had it placed on display at the Harrison Railroad Park. In July 1990, a restoration began by the Friends of the 2467, which later merged into the Pacific Locomotive Association. In June 1999, it was returned to operation and made an appearance at Rail Fair 1999. Although serviceable, SP 2467 is currently on static display while on loan from its operator, Pacific Locomotive Association Incorporated, to the California State Railroad Museum. Governor Stanford is a 440 steam locomotive originally built in 1862 by Norris Locomotive Works. Following construction, it was disassembled and hauled by ship to California. Then it went up the rivers aboard the schooner Artful Dodger, arriving in Sacramento on October 6, 1863. With a dedication ceremony that included artillery discharge, it entered service on November 9, 1863, and it was used in the construction of the first transcontinental railroad in North America by Central Pacific Railroad, bearing road number 1. It was Central Pacific's first locomotive, and it was named in honor of the road's first president and ex-governor, Leland Stanford. The Dayton, a 440 American, was built in 1873 by the Central Pacific Railroad in Sacramento, California, and was based on the design of CP's 173 engine. The locomotive weighs 78,000 pounds, has 60-inch driving wheels, and carried 2,500 gallons of water and 3 cords of wood. A large snowplow was fixed to the front of the locomotive in 1879, and it performed snow clearing duties on the Virginia and Truckee lines during the winters for most of its operational life, in addition to its normal passenger hauling duties. We hope you've enjoyed this tour of the California State Railroad Museum, and we look forward to bringing more railroad videos from our trip. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel.